Thank you, Grant. It's 6:02. I'd like to get the June 20th East Line Board of Ed special meeting, call the meeting to order. I have for those of you who can stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
Okay, first order of business is public comment. Any public comment? Any public comment? Hearing none, we will close public comment and move to the approval of our minutes of the June 5th meeting. Any adjustments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the June 5th regular education Board of Education meeting.
I'll second.
All those, any further comment? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstain. Okay, those minutes pass. Moving, we have 3 consent agenda items. Anyone want to make a motion
I'd
here?
like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as posted.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Abstain. And consent agenda passes. So the 3 items, the first one for those at home is Superintendent Newton will recommend the board to authorize him to sign a 1-year shared service agreement for the food service director with Salem Public Schools for July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, which we have done in the past and has worked very well. The second one is a proposed donation in the amount of $600 from the Rotary Club of Niantic to support the online literacy program as presented. Thank you very much to the Rotary Club. That's great and generous and very helpful. And then the third is a donation in the amount of $3,000 from Karen Share of East Lyme to support 5 East Lyme elementary families, helping to cover the cost of their participation in the Summer Fun Club. So that, thank you to Karen Share, another great organization in East Lyme, and appreciate their help and assistance. So really good things. We move to discussion action items, and the first discussion action item we have is on the community health clinic partnership.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So we move one step closer to establishing a partnership with CHC. We have an agreement that is attached to our agenda item for this evening. I also invite, and I'll introduce Jane Hyland. Jane's on Zoom with us, as well as Allison. Allison, just pronounce your last name for me, just so I make sure. Sear?
Here. Yep.
All right, just want to make sure I said that right. Jane and Allison are both from CHC, and I invite them to join us if you have any questions. Our agreement is attached. This would provide us, hopefully starting in the fall. What has to happen is once the board approves, the agreement has to go back to CHC, and then Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, it sits with your board, I think, for about 3 months, correct?
It actually goes to, I have to do a scope application with the federal government. The federal
That's right.
government just sanctions our partnership. So that can take up to 3 months.
That can
It's
take up-
already gone through our board, just so you
Okay,
know.
great. Oh, perfect. All right, wonderful. And then our hope is obviously to get this up and running in fall. So just find out what it will consist of to start off. It would be a part-time individual, 2.5 days a week, 8 hours for the 2 days, and then 4 hours for the third day. Here at the high school, we have identified some space. And it would also give us a few days, 3 days over the summer too. So in connection with Sarah Furman and Youth Services as well. So that's and then grow it from there, obviously expand, potentially get into a medical side. CHC offers a potential dental component as well. That could be something for down the road. And Allison and Jane, anything that you want to add to that? as well, or?
Not really. I mean, again, like you said, Jeff, it will start at a part-time basis while we build the practice, and then we can reassess at any point when we feel like, it's a pinch point and there's more, demand for care than that 0.5 can handle. So looking forward to the partnership.
Absolutely. There are obviously the startup fees, which I mentioned, the last time. It's a one lump sum component, which we would pay. And then once again, as Jane said, once it gets up and running, hope to expand, and it would cover its own costs for the individual, the counselor therapist, that's on site. So I'll open up to any questions. If they had a chance to, yeah, Jamie.
Under section 3, health service billing and collection,
Hold on, Jamie, just a second. Let me
Yep.
pull that.
page 2.
Yep. What letter?
Number 3,
Number 3.
page 2.
Yep.
And so all 3, if a student can't pay, they're not going to be pursued, the family's not going to be pursued, and nobody will be denied service. But who does the payment end up falling on? Does the health service, does the clinic eat the fee, or does the school pay the fee? Or is it
So
just? Bosch?
Thank you. Currently, the fee would be kind of just eaten up by the agency, like you said. The family who doesn't have insurance would be supported by our Access to Care team and help them navigate, because today almost every child in this country should be receiving coverage. I think right up to the age of 15. So that's generally the process, is if an uninsured child comes, they would get care at no cost, and we would work with that family to help them navigate the insurance system.
Thank you.
Good, thanks, Candace? I saw Candace first. and then-
Okay. So I have 2. One, how is it going to work with letting our community know that we've brought on this partnership, which I think is fantastic. I'm assuming that we're going to be advertising it and putting it out that way, people know that they can utilize it and how it works. The second thing is, what is it actually going to look like during the day? So these part-time hours are going to be functioning during school hours. So what's the plan for that? Like how's that
So-
going?
Sure. I'll take the second question, and maybe Allison
Okay.
wants to jump in with
Thank
the
you.
how we
I can
market.
answer that.
So we generally work closely with the school staff and have access to the child's school schedule, so that we would try never to, have a child in a session that would hit the same course, the same math class or the same English class. So we would mix that up somewhat. We try to use studies, we try to use, some of their specials. And that's generally the way we work well with the staff. It's a very collaborative, conversational relationship, so that, we wouldn't want to have students missing testing and, more important, credit-based courses. So we work very closely, and we work really well. And honestly, kids that generally come into our service need that. It will help them be better learners, actually, in the end. That is the goal for you guys and us. Allison, you want to tell them how we market?
Sure. So we have a load of, forgive the background noise, very active 2-year-old in the background.
That's okay.
We have electronic flyers, electronic enrollment forms, paper flyers as well. We can really set up signage throughout the school. And we can also have an online presence. So however you market to your families, whatever electronic platforms you use, we have the ability to provide you information that way. And we can also, we've done in other districts where we've added ads to newspapers to promote the services too.
Okay.
And then once we have a staff member hired and starting, we really want to capitalize on any staff meeting that's happening that month as an introductory. Hey, this is who I am, this is my background, what I can do to support you. And then going forward, also helping, support meetings throughout the school year. Definitely want to have a presence at those as well. So internal marketing, as well as community medicine.
Very good. Thank you both so much.
I would start off with an introductory letter as
Yeah,
well. and Push
okay.
out. Yep.
Thanks.
Candace tackled most of the ones that were top of mind for me. I think the only, thank you, Candace, the only clarifying question I had is I know that in the agreement, it lists the scope of health services as medical, behavioral health, and dental services. For the upcoming school year, we're just piloting with behavioral health services, is that?
Correct. Yeah,
Correct.
that's where it
That is
starts.
correct.
Great. And then over time, the goal is to also build in medical and dental services.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
hopefully, yes. Yep. Starting with, I think we'd start medical first and then behavioral potentially, but
Okay.
that's something we could expand and talk further about. But yep, just starting behavioral first.
Behavioral first, yeah.
And this is again, just not to make sure, because we're, this is not replacing anything. This is an addition to, so we're not replacing any counselors or, this is just adding on additional supports for kids.
Right. School counselors and school social workers are generally our biggest referral source. So it's all the kids that they're kind of putting Band-Aids on that need a little bit more of the more licensed clinical work that end up, in our practice.
Great. This is great.
Lisa?
Yep, thanks. Thanks for this. I think it's going to be providing a fantastic resource. I just had a question about the recruitment piece and candidate pool, and if you could kind of give us a sense of what that might look like.
So recruitment of the students?
No, of the
You think of the counselor?
yes.
For the purpose?
Oh, okay. So I'm not really sure what your question is, but we're in close to 200 schools across the state. So we're fairly well known, and our recruitment team is always kind of sourcing for interested candidates. And we look for people that have, some good background, especially with pediatrics and young adults. And, we have a pretty robust interview process, a very robust background check. And, we've seen a lot of success with the team that we've brought in. So I don't expect anything differently for East Lyme.
No, that's great. And I think just a follow-on question is, is there a pool that could be considered, or will additional recruitment efforts be needed, just to get a sense of what those resources look like? And
Sure. It's really been challenging post-pandemic around recruitment. It seems to be a better flow recently. We've been involved in lots of interviews, so there's no guarantee here. But we are filling some positions that have been open for a long time. And again, COVID impacted the workforce in so many areas, including healthcare. So we will be starting to recruit as soon as that, if in the beginning of the conversation, I talked about that federal scope, as soon as I submit that scope application, which requires a copy of the contract. As soon as I submit that, then recruitment efforts will begin, and we will begin interview. We interview throughout the summer.
thank you.
Good question.
I'm just curious about, since we have 5 different buildings, 3 elementary, middle school, high school, how is it going to be as far as the clinicians providing services, primarily just here?
Just high school to start, and then
Okay.
eventually expand. Next step would be maybe once we get full-time here, potentially based on the need, down maybe to the middle school.
So she or he would be itinerant, is that the model, or?
Potentially, yes, yeah. I think we'll see where it goes and expands to, yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve the community health clinic partnership with East Lyme Public Schools for the 2023-2024 school year as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed, abstained. This is great, great step in the right direction.
Jane and Allison, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Looking
Be
forward
in
to
touch.
it.
Take care.
Yay, Miles.
Yeah.
oh my goodness. Moving on.
That's good. Yeah, moving on to the next item. Is discussion on the former town EOC building usage, which we talked a bit about last
Mhm.
meeting. And then Friday weekly update as well.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Chris, but just a quick recap that the Historical Society had backed out of taking over, they were gonna take over the building. And just so everybody knows, if you're facing in front of central office, it's the building to the left, the old Emergency Operations Center. So it was a former firehouse. It's got garage space. Obviously, it was turned into an EOC, so it's work, but Chris has been having a lot of discussions with town members and Director of Public Works and Bill Shear. So Chris, I'll leave it up to you for some
Yeah,
updates.
so, I think that's a pretty good recap of.
Where we're at, yeah.
So I've been working with Public Works, Bill Shear, speaking with them about the state of the building, what's already in there. Getting some additional information on condition of the roof, there's a solar array, when was that on, when does that expire? Trying to get as much information as possible. One important piece of information we did gather last week when I did speak with Bill, which I'm not sure if I had a chance to talk to Jeff about yet, is just so happens that some of the IT infrastructure that's in the building has to remain part of it is power and shortwave radio and also the backup EOC there as well. But what I didn't realize is it was also a fiber optic network hub for Nutmeg 911 system for the state. So it's that portion of the building, although we thought maybe we'd be able to reutilize it in the future by moving smaller pieces of equipment around. That footprint's gonna have to remain. So that still gives us 9% of that building to utilize. And if we were going to turn it to a garage, speaking with Kyle Foley, my chief groundskeeper, who is a fireman and former chief of Flanders Firehouse, who's familiar with the building. They used to have a garage door on the backside of the building. So there's opportunities for us to, over time, and I figure it's a couple-year process before we get back to where we be, to have a really functional facilities department there. But from an immediate usage perspective, what we thought we would do, assuming we do get control of the building, would be to move the interior maintenance folks over there who have had no office or shop ever. So they have schools scattered throughout the 5 schools and central office buildings. So it'd be an opportunity for them to consolidate everything and actually do small projects. Then go out to the school to do installations and whatnot. So we would get them going right away. We clean out the first floor and then start making a functional workshop. And then the second component of that immediate activity would be to pretty much relocate all the equipment that is adjacent to the grounds building right now, next to the baseball field over there. You may have noticed that the nose for driving by that we fenced in the area for Flanders, but also by doing that, we've also made it more secure parking area for ourselves. So we'd be able to relocate that and put under the cameras and whatnot. So we'd have a good space there, free up some of the space there, make it a little less unsightly for those people who thought that, all the equipment there is a bit of a hodgepodge. So I think overall it'd be a good opportunity. We would take control of the building, take ownership, except for those items in the lease that the town has drawn up a draft one for us, which we maintain the EOC components, but the rest of the building would be responsible for. We do know that the boiler, by age, is approaching the point where you want to replace it. But otherwise, with the modifications they made to the building to support the EOC, it's actually in pretty good shape. So, willing to answer any questions anybody might have.
Any questions? Dennis?
Well, first of all, I'm excited about this. I was kind of hoping that that was going to happen when I knew that there was going to be some changes. So this is fantastic. The second thing is this is free of charge. I just wanted to,
There's no charge to take ownership. We just assume the cost of ownership.
I got it. Okay,
Yeah, no
Great.
purchase, no rental.
that's what I
that
just wanted to
nature,
make sure. Yep,
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, Chris, I'm thinking it's gonna be great as far as the equipment being stored and housed inside rather than out to the elements for one thing. And then also for people to have a space to work. And then, like you said, having all the materials and equipment located so that you can identify it.
Yeah, we would like to get to the point where we do have more garage space, so there's not everything, we won't be able to accommodate everything interior. Near future, but it'd be nice to have everything undercover at some point in time.
Absolutely,
It's a good start.
absolutely.
So now the cost of the shed to accommodate the golf cart. Can we take that money back?
That's at the middle school.
Oh, okay. I'm still on the golf cart, but I thought I'd give it a shot.
You know, Chris made a good point though with the baseball field, you know, starting games back up there. Remember being at the first one that they started and just looking over, you got all that maintenance equipment, the
Sure.
trucks, and it's just, it's an eyesore.
We have a lot,
And
yeah.
it would be great. All those trucks can fit over, you know, in the back parking lot behind the building. It cleans up and makes the campus, you know, a nicer facility as
For
well.
sure.
I will add a caveat, it's gonna be a couple of years before we can do that, you know, our grounds folks will still be in the grounds building for a while
Mhm.
and whatnot, but our ultimate goal over time with sweat equity and some actual financial equity, is to get that taken care of, and get over there.
You may not have an answer to this, but ballpark of what an annual maintenance would look like.
During that time.
I recognize that that's an
Annually-
unfair question. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like what ballpark maintenance we'd be looking at down the road.
Well, yeah, I couldn't.
Okay.
Really couldn't tell you right now, because. We really can't give you that answer.
Fair enough.
I can speculate- I can speculate a whole lot of different directions, but, at least immediately, the cost that will take over the electrical and fuel oil for the heat, the boiler.
Do we have estimates on that?
I do have that from the town, but I just not today, kind of looked at the numbers.
Well, and I think that, in all fairness too, if we have our building, housing our equipment, then the life of the equipment is going to be extended. It's not going to be put out in the elements, or it's gonna be rusting. And a car that's in a garage does a lot better than a car that sits out in the storm.
Yes.
And one quick question, so the town owns it right now, is? or
The town.
Town owns it. Can we get them, if the boiler is at its life? Can we get prior to transfer of ownership to cover? I mean, given there's other things in it as well with, that we're gonna maintain, right? You said the fiber network.
Well, they're responsible for maintaining. All that equipment, it's behind locked doors.
Yeah,
We
but
won't
if the
even have to
boiler
keep
blows
going
and
in.
it ruins all that. equipment.
Yeah.
But in our conversation with Public Works Director, Joe Regala, first thing he said is, we'd love to give you the building, the second thing he said is the boiler's going on, fix it. So I know it's,
Does he have a Band-Aid?
well, it's actually still functional, it's just old.
And reuse the one we used to put on the middle school one.
Seriously.
Or maybe
This is like a residential, this isn't.
Oh, so it's not like a big one. of
Oh,
those
yeah.
fixed-
No, no.
It's like the
The
one
size
that's in
of
my
that building
basement.
is- significantly
That's much more manageable.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'm super excited about this, and, down the road, I don't want to be looking at, some crazy
Like
cost
50
that
grand per
takes us
boiler.
by surprise and we're kind of backtracking, so.
Will this be a yearly lease or like indefinite, or like how would it work?
They sent over the draft lease that they had developed for when it was going to the historic organization. Now, of course, that's not a town organization per se, so that did have a terminating date on it. I would think this would probably be in perpetuity, provided that
Mhm.
each party maintains the lease agreement as it's written.
Mhm.
Take care of X, they take care of Y. They are going to pay the cost of electricity. They haven't sent their electricity, which is probably 95% of the cost of electricity. All we're gonna use is a couple of lights, the power's on occasion, so there won't be much in the way of electrical costs. We'll pay the fuel costs. And actually, the good side of that aspect of things, since you're paying the electrical costs, it is still an air conditioned building because the dispatch center was in there, so our cost is almost nothing for the electrical. So, yeah.
Any other questions? Great, thanks, Chris. Let us know how You get on with it, yeah. Okay, next we move on to discussion action items instructional, and we have a discussion on the 2022-2023 district formative summative data and assessment. I think Annalise is gonna drive
Just
this.
gonna run
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have paper copies of the presentation. Definitely want to just give.
Yeah, I can hold on. Yeah.
And then if you want to take one, pass around, this is a little bit of, you know, in the world of education, we like to use acronyms. Or perhaps some of the vocabulary that is used in the everyday world.
Yeah, sure.
Just a little cheat sheet there for you if you need it.
I just came this way.
You know what I want.
Two, I don't. I'll only read it once. I don't.
Any more? You want more?
You guys okay?
It's the
Using
same thing on
electronic?
mine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing on mine, exactly. Just try to lessen that paper consumption, so we only brought a couple.
Sorry, guys.
Here's the cheat sheet, everybody wants for acronyms.
It's more than, and actually, it's way more than acronyms, but it's just, in case you hear something, you want to go back and think about. Data can be complicated, the vocabulary we use around data, you know, can become confusing, and so I figured just to have an anchor document to refer to it. So, I just want to start by thanking the board for allowing, myself as well as the team that I brought along tonight, the space and time to share, what I am referring to as stories at each building level. So we're going to talk to you about the use of our data, what types of data do we use, how do we use it? But instead of providing you slide after slide of data, what I've asked each of the teams at each level to do is to provide you with a story around what is the data that we're looking at, snapshots of it, and how do we use that to drive decisions at the building level. And so each level will share their story affiliated with that. And I have brought along an amazing team tonight. So before I move on with my component of the presentation, I do just want to take a second to introduce our team. We have at the elementary level, Principal Danielle Showman. And we have Niantic Center math coach, Sue Neer. At the middle school level, we have Assistant Principal Shane Anderson. And we have our middle school math coach, Kristen Amaral. And at the high school level, we have Principal Deb Kelly. High schoolers always sit in the back, by the way. I can say that because I was a high school person. We have literacy coach Kim Reed. And we have our English classroom teacher, Kate Grant. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how do we use assessment at each of the different levels. Depending on the level we're talking about, we might look at different types of assessment, and those assessments might serve a little bit of a different purpose. So we look at this through the lens of district, building, and classroom levels. And you're going to see and hear examples of all three of these during tonight's presentation. But just to give you an example of what we're talking about, you know, why is data at the district level important? And you have seen examples of this. I have provided you with summative analysis of data. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few slides. Who uses it? We use it. Community leaders might use it. I've even been asked questions from the Board of Finance with regards to some of our assessment data. So this might be the data that I use. And these are annual scores that are big data, comparable data. We look at numbers and percentage of students meeting or making growth on different target scores. At the building level, we're looking more towards, are our students mastering standards? Are our programs that we're using working? And who might be using this? It could be teachers who are in what we call MTSS teams, multi-tiered systems of support teams. It could be me working individually with a building principal. And you know, this type of data is periodic but frequent. It looks at both classroom practices, but as well as intervention services that we might be providing in the building. And then of course, there's the classroom level. So who's using this data? Students and teachers are using this data. We're looking at what's coming next in the learning for those folks. And this is a continuous ongoing process, whether it's a show of hands, writing something on a board to demonstrate learning, thumbs up, consensus, all the way to quizzes, units, assessments, those types of things. So then within these levels of data that we're looking at, what types of assessment do we use? Because tonight you're going to hear lots of words like summative, universal screener, benchmark, and progress monitoring. So what does this mean when we talk about the use of the data at the different levels? So summative, the purpose of a summative data is like our SBA final exams. It's really to evaluate the overall learning achievement over a longer period of time. So an end of a unit, a course, midterm and final exams, and SPA, SAT, PSAT assessments are all examples of this. Universal screeners are screeners that we look at. We usually give those at least 3 times a school year to identify any gaps that a student might have in his or her learning. So we're looking at fall, winter, spring assessment data. Usually students are flagged in different areas that provide us with information on what they need to be successful. Examples of these that we use here in Eastline are a platform called iReady, and that we use that for math, a platform called STAR, we use that for reading, and a platform at the elementary that we're using right now is Lexia for reading. And then there's benchmark assessment.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand what
Yeah.
universal screener is. I guess 2 questions. One is it a check-in? Or have you already identified, is it a check-in with all students, or have you already identified students who may have a need and now you're kind of assessing?
So universal screener is a check-in for all students.
Okay.
All students take this assessment. However, we might use that same assessment to also check in or progress monitor it.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, so
Okay.
some of these can actually be the same assessment that we're using for multiple purposes.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we're really trying to get to a universal assessment system where all of our students in all grade levels across all buildings take the same assessment. We're not there yet quite in literacy, but we will be next year. But for example, in grades 5 through 12, every single one of our students takes that STAR reading assessment. So it's also universal in the way that we can actually look at trend data across multiple years and see how students are progressing over a course of time. So benchmark is more, are they making progress towards the growth standards that we've set for them? Again, it could be the same assessments that we're using already, but it also can be other things like unit tests. And we do provide students what are called SBA interim assessments. Those are smaller, smarter balanced assessments that are used over the course of the school year to measure growth on different standards. And lastly, there's the progress monitoring. So if we set an academic goal for a student, we would use data to progress monitor their growth towards that goal. And so those are frequent and less high stakes for quizzes, checks, math fact assessments, those types of things. The point of this is when we're looking at student and information that we're collecting around them, we're looking at a balanced assessment system. So beyond the academic assessment, we're also looking at maybe behavior referrals, other types of referrals that might be coming in, attendance data. But in addition to that, we're also looking at data triangulation. You can't make a decision based off one data point. You have to look at multiple data points to just confirm that the data that you're looking at is valid and reliable. So I'm going to provide you with an example of how I've done that since my last presentation to you around 5th grade math, and how I've used other assessment data to confirm that we kind of have an issue here and we need to do something about it, okay? So if you remember this slide from the last fall presentation on SBA, I highlighted a number of different findings. Tonight, I'm going to circle back around with 2 of those. The first is that our student-centered coaching model has supported growth in key areas. I'm going to talk and highlight some successes we've had in that just by looking at some data. But then I've also shared with you that patterns of assessment data in grade 5 indicate the need to investigate further. And I'm gonna use math as an example here. I put this slide in front of you last time as well. And what this slide represents is historical math performance index data. So this is really a kid's average score on the SBA. And that is over the course of 3 years. And just with the disclaimer, of course, we're missing the 1920 year because of the C word. So it doesn't have that, but it's over the course of 3 years. And where it says current sixth graders, so that's this year's sixth graders, last year's fifth graders, which is what this data is representing, okay? You'll see that their average score was an 81.6 in the 17-18 year, 85.6 in the 19-20 year, and then 64.8 in the 21-22 school year. This was the last school year. So you see that there's a significant drop there in the average score. We know that students are transitioning from 4 to 5. And you can see that for our 7th and 8th graders, it was really it was more flat. There's some things we need to pay attention to, but to me, the area of real concern there is that drop. And so you wonder, well, you know, is it just because the 5th grade assessment is harder than all the other assessments? Like, how did we measure up against other districts in the way of this assessment score? And I don't know if you remember this slide that I put in front of you. This was more towards growth, but we are certainly not leading the DER in 5th grade assessment math scores. It is an area of concern. So this is another way of looking at data to say, is this really an issue? You know, is it a East Line problem, or is it more of a universal statewide or national problem? So now we start to say, well, this looks a little bit to be an East Line problem that we need to look closer at. Yes.
There's a question just on the previous slide, just so I make sure I have it right. So the 6th grade, the drop from 85.6 to 64.8 was the move to 5th grade.
Correct.
And then for 7th graders, the drop from the 83.1 to 74.7 was a move to 5th grade.
That is correct.
And the reason the 8th graders don't have it is because they
That
were
data
already
was
done.
the same.
Well, the data would have been, we would have needed a,
COVID data. It was a COVID year. So
oh, it was a COVID year. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I know this slide is busy, so just bear with me for a second as I explain it to you. What you're looking at are assessment performance bands. So blue and green are, green is meeting, blue is exceeding. Okay, red is not meeting, yellow is approaching. So we like green and blue. Okay, so if you look at 3rd grade over the past, now this is not cohort analysis, but if you just look at our 3rd graders from 21 to 22 to 23. From last year to this year, we've seen an 11% increase in that blue and green performance range. We like that. That's a really nice number there. What's that's telling us is we're closing achievement gaps that and addressing that learning loss that has happened. Even better, if you look at our 3rd graders from last year in the 2022 school year, and compare them to the 4th grade metrics in 2023, we saw a 17% gain. That means 17% more students met or exceeded performance indicators on the SBA assessment. I attribute this success to the work of the coaches and the teachers working together, looking at data, and Ms. Muir will share a little bit more information around really what that looks like to this level of growth. But you can see that from grade 4 to 5, where there seems to be a trend here. So we've had a 20% gain, or excuse me, a 20% loss this year. Last year it was 18%. So this is a trend that we're really trying to get a hold of. So then I've only talked to you about SBA data. And remember I said, looking at balanced assessment, multiple data points, triangulating data is important. So now what I'm showing you is 5th grade iReady. This is that iReady benchmark assessment that we use. and what that data is demonstrating. So the orange bar is our fourth graders last year, and the gray bar is our fifth graders this year. And so you can see that, you know, progress towards annual typical growth, which is a measure of the iReady assessment, significantly declines from that transition. So that really indicates to me that we have a problem that we need to address. And we've been talking about this all year long. So I told you back in the fall, I feel a sense of urgency around this. So we've already gotten to work. And one of the best things that happened this year is that Ms. Amaral, along with the elementary school coaches, have done a ton of collaborating. Ms. Amaral's gone down to the elementary level, visited with the math coaches, visited with fourth grade. Fourth grade has come up to the middle school. We've had a lot of workful conversation. So we're, you know, Ms. Amaral being in her first year of coaching this year in that math position, really came in as a learner and wanting to know what's the work that's happening at the elementary level where you're getting all these gains. So collaboration is key. The other piece that I attribute to the middle school leadership team is that fifth grade schedule analysis, which they presented to you just about a month ago. And one of the data points that we looked at was the assessment data, and through that shift in the assessment or in the fifth grade schedule, we have actually captured a significant amount of instructional time for math and literacy. Because when you look at some of the low-hanging fruit out there, students are going from 60 minutes of math instruction a day to 90, right? 60 to 90 to 42 minutes of math instruction in fifth grade. You know, that's a significant less amount of time for instruction, especially for our fifth graders who really need time to wrestle with concepts and practice and get feedback from their teachers. So the additional instructional time will go into effect next year. And I am putting my eggs in that basket. Like, we are putting our eggs in some of these baskets that we really know that the research demonstrates this is where impact happens. And we're also looking very closely at curriculum. We have very loosely written fifth grade math curriculum that was needed to be you know, analyzed and looked at. We did some piloting this year. Ms. Amaral will show you some data, some promising data as a result of that pilot, but we'll be moving to adopting a primary resource in math specifically for fifth grade next year to help align our core practices across the classrooms in fifth grade and anchor ourselves to best practice and explicit instruction in math.
Annalise, do you want, I know I already asked 2 questions. Do you want to wait till the end?
Well,
Or
I think for the sake of time, maybe
Okay.
not, unless it's a clarifying question that you won't, you don't understand, you know, you need to know in order to better understand. I think probably it's best.
thank you.
All right, so I am now going to pass it off to my colleague, Daniel Shulman, who's going to walk us through what assessment data looks like at the elementary level.
And good evening. Great, so tonight I will be walking you through an example of the data analysis protocol that we use at the elementary level and how that protocol supports our MTSS process. So we engage in continuous cycles of data analysis. We give the benchmark assessments 3 times per year. And then also in between those benchmark assessments, progress monitor at the school and the classroom level. So after each benchmark is given, we meet as a school improvement team, which is made up of classroom teachers from every level, a special education teacher, a special area teacher, as well as the coaches and myself. And we go through this protocol, analyze the data, and then come together to develop a summary of our findings. Those findings are then brought to our teaching and learning meetings, which occur bi-weekly, and those are made up of grade level teams. And there we dig in a little bit deeper when it comes to the data. So we have this overarching data analysis and then really hone in on the grade level specifics and see how students are performing. Based off those conversations, we determine if students should be sent to our MTSS process and identified for tier 2 or tier 3. And then our MTSS process is also a bi-weekly process where we discuss the progress monitoring of all of our students in tiers and make adjustments to either exit from tier, remain, or change the plan. Our school improvement teams were lucky enough in the fall to engage in professional learning with consultants from CERC And they overviewed several different data analysis protocols, and Flanders went forward with one called the ECI-BI protocol, which is the effectiveness of core instruction and the effectiveness of intervention. So I'll be walking you through that protocol tonight. We'll go to the next slide. You have it. Great. Sorry. There you go. Okay, next slide. Great. So one screener that we use is Lexia Rapid, and that was on the slide that Annalise showed previously. And the screener assesses students' decoding, language, and comprehension. In third grade, I'm focusing on comprehension because it can be a helpful predictor of students' reading success. So when looking at the comprehension subtest, we consider students to be at the 40th percentile or above on level. So you can see the on level section in the top. Those students that are between the 25th and 39th percentile are approaching grade level. And then those students that fall below the 25th percentile are at risk. Now you may say, you know, why the 40th percentile? And that is a cut score that Lexia provides. And that's a nationally normed screening measure, and students falling at the 40th percentile or above are within one standard deviation of the national mean. So that's just a standardized measure. So I will walk you through this slide. As I said, that's an example of a grade 3 comprehension subtest on Lexia. So in third grade, there were 55 students that were assessed in the winter. And this is our movement from winter to spring. As I said, we do fall to winter, winter to spring, and then look at the whole year. So 55 students took this assessment. Of the 55 that took it in the winter, 29 were on level, and then by the spring, 28 were on level. So over the course of half a year, one student went off level. So you may also ask, why is that? Well, we ask the same thing. So whenever we see a student go from on level to approaching or at risk, we look more deeply at that student. So first we consider other sources of information, such as are there social emotional needs with that student? Is there language acquisition with that student? And then we also look at classroom work samples and performance. We might conduct another screener to see if this is really true, a true data set for that student. And we'll also look at longitudinal data. How has this student performed over the years? So then you look at the winter off level, 26 students. So of those 26, 15 were in the approaching, and 8 of those students moved to on level. 2 remained approaching, 5 moved to the at-risk category. Then you have your at-risk category. There were no students that moved from at-risk to on level, but 2 did move to approaching, 9 stayed at risk. So as a data team, once we organize this, we dig a little bit deeper into the movement between those 3 levels. So you'll see here each student and where they are at risk, approaching on level. So we really look at the supports that are available to our students, who has support, what that support looks like, and who needs support. So something to really pay attention to: the at-risk students, the 5 that were identified at risk, are all special education students. So we would have conversations with the special education case managers as well as the classroom teacher. Look at goals and objectives that are currently in the IEP and make sure that those goals and objectives align to what those students need. We also have the 8 students that moved to on level. 3 were receiving tier supports, you can see, and were exited from those tier supports. So we see that those were really successful. And then 3 moved due to their tier 1 instruction. So just because a student is approaching doesn't mean they automatically get tier 2 intervention. We might do a tier 1 boost group where a coach is going into the classroom and helping out, or we might just hone in on certain strategies that need to be utilized in the classroom to make that movement. So then I'll discuss our at risk. So as you can see, the majority of our students that fell at risk on this assessment were identified as special education. 1 student had a behavior plan as part of our MTSS process. The 2 that moved to approaching, 1 was a special education student, and 1 student was not receiving tier service, was not on a behavior plan. There were no other indicators. So once again, we would dig in a little bit deeper. But I do want to just kind of reiterate what Annalise had said previously, that we really do need to triangulate our results because this is just one assessment. So for example, we know that reading comprehension is really dependent on decoding skills, right? So students need to be able to physically read the text before they'll be able to comprehend it. So for some of our students, they might be at risk in this comprehension assessment because they don't yet have those solid decoding skills to be able to read the text. So when we dig a little bit deeper, we can look at that decoding subtest and see movement and progress there. So it's still an indicator of progress. It might just not show up on this one screener. So we definitely dig deep into our results. So then, once all of the data is organized, there's 5 questions that we ask as a school improvement team. So first, we ask who's better off and what impact did we have on student learning. So we look at our data through a strength-based lens and really look at what do we notice. So are there certain patterns across classrooms, across grade levels, across the school? And do those patterns support certain students or subgroups of students? And if so, what are those patterns? We ask what we did and under what conditions were our students most and least successful. So we talk about the instruction and behavioral supports at each of the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 levels. We ask how well did we do and what do we want to start, stop, and continue. So we describe instructional approaches that were utilized at the classroom level and the intervention level to advance student learning and certain subgroups. And then also, what did we do that did not accelerate student learning? And we look at that through the lens of curriculum, instruction, and classroom environment. Next, we talk about how does the information gained from this data analysis inform professional learning and professional development across the building. So we discuss the need and then we utilize structures that we have in place, such as future teaching and learning meetings, faculty meetings, our half-day professional development meetings, to really target PD based on what students and what staff need right now. And then finally, how do we know when we've been successful? So we determine strategies that we want to implement, and we talk about how we're going to monitor the effectiveness of those strategies and the implementation of those strategies. How will we monitor our student progress? And we develop goals at those teaching and learning meetings, and those goals are monitored over the course of the next several weeks until we get to that next benchmark assessment. I also, as a building administrator, when I go into classrooms, I am looking for evidence of progress towards these goals. And then just next steps. So after we have this data analysis protocol, we bring it to teaching and learning, make goals. As I said, this is a continuous progress monitoring. So every 2 weeks, we meet the teaching and learning meetings. We might have an example of a short professional learning. This year, for example, we were looking at modeling as an element of explosive instruction. So we viewed a video from Anita Archer, discussed what we saw, and then talked about how that could be utilized in the classroom. And then how are we monitoring the effectiveness of those strategies? So it's just a continuous process. As I said, we also use our MTSS structure to discuss student progress. And then lastly, the potential to align our coaching cycles with these identified areas of need. And the coaches are an integral part of those teaching and learning meetings. So we utilize all the structures that we have in place to make sure that we know where students are throughout the whole course of the year. So next up, Sumir from the Magnetic Center, coach there, is going to dive in a little bit deeper in regard to teaching and learning meetings, and she will speak to you more.
Thank you. So I'm going to piggyback on everything that you said, and I'm going to give you a real snapshot of what some data analysis that drives our student instruction really looks like. And it comes from the iReady math assessments. The iReady math assessments are given 3 times a year to grade 2 through 4 students. And it's a computer adaptive test, so it does take into consideration what the student is doing and in that moment. Take that data and then at the teaching and learning meetings, we along with the principals and the grade level teams really work on how to look at that data and decide what we need to do to use that data to fill in some blanks for some of our students. So I'm going to show you what we looked at. We looked at the winter iReady data for 4th grade, and that's the very first column on the left. The winter data, it started to show us that students were really looking that they needed a little bit more instruction with geometry. And we got started to identify, we can drill down even deeper into the iReady data and find out exactly what those students can do well and what it's showing that they might need a little bit more work with. So as we said, there's more than one data point that we need to look at. So what we did was in that team meeting, we took those 8 students that you see on the very left, winter geometry iReady scores. Yellow and red are obviously not green, which is one of our colors that we like. And 465 is the cut point for a meeting goal. So in the winter is the perfect place to then start looking at where can we fix up some of these students so that this will help them when they get to the next geometry unit in 4th grade. If they don't have the prerequisite skills that they need to go into that next 4th grade level of skills, then we're just building on a really rocky foundation. So we identified as a team, those 8 students, and we then came up with a pre-test and a post-test. Now, you might say, some people would like to know why we do a pre-test when you already have some data. Well, if you look over on the 3rd column, which says geometry boost pre-assessment. We decided to put those 8 students in some boost groups, but we had to come up with a plan, which we did, which included a pre-test, and that would also become the post-test. It was based on their needs, specifically what iReady was telling us their needs were, which were the vocabulary of geometry and the attributes of polygons. So, learning geometry vocabulary is like learning a different language. It really is. So students who struggle a little bit sometimes in the area of English language sometimes have more trouble with geometry than other students might have. It is a very difficult thing to understand for young children. But anyway, so what we did was we came up with a pre-post, as I said, and then we decided we were going to do 5 lessons where we push into the classrooms. I would come in, my tutor would come in, classroom teachers would help out, we'd find a good time of day to do this. And we would teach 5 different lessons. So we came up with the lessons together as well. If you look at the data that is geometry pre-assessment, you will see that most of them did indeed show that they could use some help in those areas of vocabulary with geometry and with the attributes of geometry. So, but if you'll notice, there's one kid there that got an 85%. He was our anomaly. He just didn't seem to score well on that one particular iReady test. So we said, okay, instead of making him have to do all of the 5 lessons, let's pull him separately. We fixed him up by giving him 1 lesson. We let him simmer for a little bit. About a week later, we came back and gave him the post-assessment and he scored 100%. So after we then finished all of those lessons, we did the post-assessment, and as you can see, the very far right column over there is the geometry post-assessment where everybody scored 80% or above. And that still doesn't mean that every kid is going to hold on to all of that language, because as I said, vocabulary is tough in geometry. Then came time for the spring assessment in iReady. And now we're back over to the other side again, and it's the spring geometry iReady scores. And what you can see there is that they made significant gains. 465 was the cut point to get green score to be at goal. And if you'll notice, the 570, that was the same student who scored the 85% on pre-test. And the 570 actually is, I looked it up, and it's more considered like a pretty high level. I would, it's saying it's about a 7th grade level. So he was an anomaly, but without that pre-test, he would have been sitting with us doing lessons that he didn't need to do. So this is what we do in the elementary level. I don't think we need to look at the data, we need to analyze it very carefully, and then we need to decide what do these kids really need. We don't want to give them something that they don't need. We want them to be successful at the things we give them. And so within about 5 lessons, we were able to fix these 8 students. So we felt pretty good about that. And also, it might be helpful to note that these 8 students, some of them were special ed students without math goals. Some were in the tier 2 math process. Some were students with no accommodations at all. So we really ran the gamut with them. So I think that was just a pretty good synopsis or snapshot of what we really do on the elementary level. So now, I'd like to hand it over to the middle school.
Thank you, Sue.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to start us a little bit and talk about the process of middle school for analyzing data, although you'll note that it actually is going to sound very similar to the elementary school, just in terms of different structure with the people that we have in the building. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to walk you through a little bit of specifics about some of the data that we have and how we use it. In terms of looking at data at the middle school, we're really looking at three facets. How are our students performing? What are our students need? And what are our teachers need? So these are the three questions. We're going to walk you through a little bit how we go about answering these questions throughout the school year. Like I said, our process is very similar to that of the elementary school in that it's a cyclical process. So there's really 4 stages: assess, analyze, implement, and monitor. So the assessment piece is the assessments that we're talking about, is those screening assessments and the assessments that we've had from the past, any longitudinal data that we look at. We take some time to analyze that. Who is analyzing that is going to depend on the student, the need, and the teacher. So for years, we've had what we call kid talk meetings with our interdisciplinary team, where the counselor will come, we'll talk to the staff about what social emotional needs the student has. This year, at the request of the coaches and the interventionists, we've added an academic kid talk where the coaches and interventionists come and talk to the staff about what do students need academically, what are you seeing that you need as a teacher academically. So that can happen in that way. Sometimes they also happen in terms of department. The departments will pull up the spreadsheets that we have, and I'm going to give you an example in a moment of the spreadsheets that we have to go over at what are areas we're seeing across the board that our students need, and what are supports that you need to help students in those areas. From there, they determine what it is they're going to do for students, and we begin to implement. So whether that's a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention, or some coaching cycles, or even some new resources that Kristen's going to talk about in a moment too, and we monitor as well. So we've implemented cycles this year. So every 7 weeks or so, it's just like come back to the table, let's reanalyze, let's take a look at where our students are at this point, in addition to new assessment data that we have. So this is an example of just a snapshot of one of the math spreadsheets we use. We also have one for ELA, we have one for science, and we have one for social studies. We're looking to expand that a little bit as we move forward too. So you kind of see all of the data we use for 6th grade. So this is a 6th grade spreadsheet, and we're looking at it really for 2 reasons. One, to help us determine what students need in the classroom setting, but also which students are in need of tier 2 supports and which students are in need of tier 3 support. So again, green and blue are those colors we're looking for. SBAC is the only one that has the blue. So in case you're looking at it and wondering why there's no blue anywhere else, SBAC is the only one that has that. But as you look across, you can kind of see which students we might be talking about in terms of needing additional support. So you're looking at those reds and yellows. The other piece that's on here, which is unique to this grade level, is called the Iowa Algebra Aptitude Test. So in 7th grade, we have to make decisions about whether a student should be in Math 7 or Accelerated Math 7. And it's an additional assessment we give in order to better triangulate the data about which students are ready to take on some more of those algebra skills, which students should remain on grade level where they're at. So now I want to pass it on to Kristen to go through the details.
Another way that we at the building level use data is to look at student and staff needs. This would drive decision-making around students by looking at really more of a bigger picture. So a whole grade level, or maybe a whole team at the middle school. And when we're looking at that level, we're looking what changes do we need to make in core instruction, which would be their everyday math class. For staff, looking at needs at the building level, this would help us focus on coaching cycles. So what is it that we're going to look at during a coaching cycle? What professional learning and resources do our staff really need? So an example at the building level of using data to determine student and staff needs is in grade 5, we looked at some iReady data for the entire grade level. And that top graph is broken down. Green, again, represents students on or above grade level. Yellow would be just below, and red would be of concern, so significantly below grade level. And in this graph, it's also broken down by domain in math. So how are students performing in numbers and operations, algebraic thinking, measurement data, and then the last is geometry.
So you can see where that black arrow is right there, that geometry seemed to be an area of relative weakness for our fifth graders in the fall. Had the fewest number of students in the green and the most number of students in the red. And so we knew this year, as Annalee spoke to earlier, that we wanted to pilot a new curriculum resource in grade 5. And so we thought if we were going to pilot a resource anyway, let's see if we can do it in an area of need for our fifth graders. So we decided to pilot 2 geometry units using illustrative math. And we can use that same data in the spring to determine the effectiveness of those coaching cycles in that new resource. So the spring graph is below, and that shows how students are doing, and those percentages would show the amount of increase in students on or above grade level for each domain. So for example, students in numbers and operations, the number of students on grade level increased by 40%. Same thing, algebraic thinking, the number of students on grade level increased by 24%. And our area of focus with our new resource was significantly higher in terms of percent increase, with 79% of students showing growth from the fall into the spring with being on grade level. So that was promising data for our new resource. It really moved students a lot in geometry. We're looking forward to using that for all of next year in grade 5. We're going to zoom in now a little bit to the classroom level. So this is on a more individual level. I wanted to highlight what Shane spoke to, the process of using data on a more specific example with an individual. So this is a student that was receiving tier 3 interventions. They work with our interventionist in a group of 2 every other day for about 45 minutes. And one thing that our interventionist does is she uses data from classroom assessments to drive some reteaching during intervention. So the assessment that she used was on describing data, and the original score that the student had was a 74%. So there were clearly some areas that student hadn't mastered yet. And in analyzing that test, our interventionist found that the area was really just involving finding an average. The student missed the mark on calculating the mean. And so the interventionist implemented 2 lessons to go back and reteach that concept. What is an average? How is mean calculated? And then progress monitored using her own post-assessment, just a quick assessment kind of in the moment to make sure that the student was responding well. And then as Sue mentioned, that's great, but how is the student responding to those interventions over time? It's also something that we would be concerned with. And so that larger graph right there shows how that tier 3 student is responding on their iReady test over the benchmark, so fall, winter, and spring. So we can see that the student is responding well to tier 3 interventions. And then more specifically, if we continue this process of reteaching as students need it in the area of measurement data, we can see that specifically in that domain, the student also progressed well. The beginning of the year at grade 2 in that domain, and then progressing all the way up to grade 5. This student was a 6th grade student, so they are almost back to grade level based on their iReady. And then another way that we anticipate student needs, again, zoomed in at the classroom level, is that we can use data to not just reteach and respond, but also to anticipate. So this shows an example of a coaching cycle focus that was done in 6th grade flex, which is when we give our tier 2 interventions to kind of a mixed bag of students. So some students in the classroom would qualify as tier 2 students, but some students in that classroom were also special ed students. Some students were not tier 2 students, but they were kind of on the cusp and were struggling a bit. So we had a mixed bag in that classroom. The upcoming unit in grade 6 was on ratios and rates. And so that classroom teacher gave what's called a readiness check that's provided by our curriculum resource Desmos that we use in grade 6. And a readiness check has a couple of carefully selected questions that target essential skills from grades 4 and 5. That if students were missing those skills, they would really struggle in that grade 6 unit. So the teacher analyzed that data and found that there were major gaps in their understanding of equivalent fractions from prior grade levels. And so over the course of a 2-week period during that flex period, so every day during that flex time, the teacher implemented interventions on what are equivalent fractions, how do we represent, determine, and create equivalent fractions.
and then gave that same readiness check again at the end of the 2-week period. They went from having only 20%, so a fifth of that group of students demonstrate mastery, to 70% of the flex group demonstrate mastery, which doesn't seem, 70% doesn't seem like a great number, but it is a pretty mixed bag in that room. So it seemed to be definitely moving in the right direction. And then again, another check on how students responded to those interventions would be then to see how did they do in that unit. So we tried to anticipate their gaps and fill them before they got there. And so you can see that those tier 2 students did actually really well on that unit at grade level. So we're using data to drive decision-making around anticipating student needs so that we can bring them up to be successful in their core instruction.
We just wanted to leave you with a piece of data that just highlights the success of the intervention program we have. Thanks to the coaches and interventionists as well for having the support, and thank you to you for providing us with that support. So last year in the 21-22 school year, we had 21 students that were exited from tier 3 interventions. This year, I know it's 34, which was the case when the PowerPoint was created, but I just checked today, we actually had 49 students this year who were exited from tier 3 interventions. So we're talking about the number of students who were not referred to special education because they were successful in their interventions.
Very good. Thank you both.
And I'm going to pass it on to the high school so Deb Kelly can read and feedback.
Hi, everybody. So the high school uses a wide variety of data, but somewhat different data because we are using SAT, PSAT scores, as well as SAR and Tim and Kate will get into some of the details. But when we're developing building goals, which is what I work with the leadership team to do, we really do look at some of the broader summative assessments that Annalise was referencing before. When we're determining what our goals are going to be, what we might need to do with curriculum, what we might need to be looking at for instruction. Now we have interventionists both in literacy and math, so we're working with them, and even sometimes staffing needs. So I'm going to review a snapshot of some of the data that we consider. So we get together in the summer, we're looking at SATs, PSATs, APs. We're looking for growth over time. We're also looking for a new area where we think we need to focus. We also review attendance data, behavior data, climate data. But one of the areas that we pay very close attention to is the discrepancy that we might find between our high needs students and our students that are not high needs. So the state defines high needs students as students who are receiving special ed services, ELL services, or free and reduced lunch. So this is the past 5 years, and we don't have current year data because state hasn't released that yet from the spring SAT, but we'll be looking at that in the summer. The last 5 years of our literacy tests, so our evidence-based reading and writing SAT scores on the SAT school day, which is the test that everybody takes during the day. And you can see that the first, they're in pairs. So the top one is 5 years ago, and that is the red would say the kids that have not met benchmark, the percentage of students. Benchmark is defined by the SAT as being college and career ready. So if you're not meeting benchmark or you're approaching benchmark, based on the research that they've done, you're not probably ready to graduate yet or to go out into the world. And all of these are standardized based on grade level too. So this is all 11th grade spring. You can see in literacy, which we've had the distinct pleasure of having Kim Reed and now an MTSS person and another interventionist working on literacy. We have made pretty tremendous gains in literacy over time, both in our kids that are exceeding as well as fewer kids that are not reaching benchmark. And the gap is also closing. So that's been an area of true growth for us. And they'll talk more about what they do on the student level to reach that. This is our math scores, same period of time. And you can see that this tells a little bit of a different story. And when I said that sometimes we use this data to talk about staffing needs, this is what we were looking at when we really pushed to have a math and TSS person and a math coach. Now, math is kind of weird with the SAT. Our kids score better than the state. we do pretty well on it. But obviously, based on what the College Board believes is college and career ready, we have some areas to make up. So we have been really looking at this data along with math coach Megan Gross and the whole department to talk about curriculum, to talk about interventions, where coaching needs to happen. Especially what courses we offer, who's taking those courses, how they need to be supported, so that we can work towards closing some of those gaps. The science department also has NGSS scores to look at. And we look at this with them every year to make sure that we're providing students with the information that they need prior to taking the NGSS to be prepared for the test at all levels. So whether you're in AP chemistry or you're in a foundation science class, you're being exposed to the skills that you need for that. And then the other focus that we've had a lot, that we've put a lot of time into the last few years is climate. So we have developed an MTSS, or in the process of developing MTSS for SEL. So we've been working with school counselors, social workers, school psychologists on some of that to help better provide interventions for students that might need either help based on DESA scores or also just help based on how they're feeling. But we've really pushed the faculty in the last couple of years to work on making connections with students. And this data shows you, and I'm pretty excited about this actually. We've made great gains in this area. But I think some of it is restorative practices. I think some of it is coming out of the pandemic. I also think we switched our schedule around and we now have homeroom, so we have students seeing the same teacher every single day. And we saw a huge increase in the number of students that say that they felt that there was at least one adult in the building that they felt a close connection to. So I'm pretty excited about that. So as I said, I'm just showing you a snapshot of some of the things that we look at as a leadership team as we develop our building goals. I'm going to turn this over to Kim and Kate to talk to you a little bit more about what we do with students and to how data informs our course and curriculum development, as well as how we use it to support our individual students.
Okay, but before I jump into the course structure, I kind of want to give you a little bit of overview of the basic course structure. We have level courses that begin from foundations to AP, which is advanced placement, or ECE, which is, I think of the acronym for that, early college experience, the UConn version of that. And we have multiple levels, but it's really with the same common goal. And the goal is to provide students with an opportunity to reach the college and career readiness, and especially it's in literacy and math. In order to do that, though, we want to make sure that those levels are not ceilings. Levels are not tracking, that it's genuinely to elevate learning and where students' needs are met exactly where they are, and so that we can cater to those things. In order to do that, though, you need to use data. And we use data to make decisions about curriculum planning, what the courses are going to look like, how do those courses, if this is the course and all the levels, how do they align? So students can move in and out as needed. Instructional practices, well, there's some practices that are great for all students and on all levels, and some that are not. And so we use this to evaluate those practices and to make sure that our students are making the gains and getting the practice. The teachers have the tools to do those practices. That comes through, it also informs our PD, informs our coaching cycles, our PLCs, and our school goals. And last and most importantly, we use data to inform individual student growth. And where our students are, yes, this is great that this course and most of the students are doing really well, but we don't care about most students, we care about every student. So I'll get into that. Okay, we talked quickly, when we use universal screeners, and I think Deb just mentioned it, we use the PSAT 9, 10, and 11. The SAT Spring is our benchmark right there, and universal screener, I know we use this anonymously. We also use STAR. The STAR, we also use it for reading and for math. It's given 3 times a year, and it allows us to forecast. There's a correlation, or there's a certain reports we use that are correlate with SAT, so we can see where students are on track. Okay. Let's just look at my notes. So here's an example of strategic planning, and I'm really proud of this, of how, and then I'm speaking from the lens of English, I apologize, because that's where I work a lot with the English department. How we are very strategic in how we place students in different levels. Here's an example of a B-level English class, and for the last 2 years. When we are very strategic in how we place students and how we create curriculum for that, we're able to move students out of B and move them on to A or honors. If you notice in ninth grade, by the time they're in 12th grade, usually half the students are still in a B level class. There's some, not to get into the weeds, but you might notice that 11th to 12th is less movement, or it seems like it's different. We also have foundation students that are moving into B, so it kind of muddies the numbers because we're moving them up. But our goal is always to make sure we're moving students in the most challenging environments. Okay, here's an example, which is really cool, of how we use data to inform curriculum planning and programming. So 80% of students at Benchmark are on SATs in English. Yeah, we're all excited about that, 80%. But that's still 20% that didn't. And one of our problems of practice is that, well, what do we do for the 20%? That's still, we only have 1 year to catch them up. So this year, as one of our problems, we're like, yes, we can do interventions, but that's 43 kids. The 2 interventionists, almost 1,000 kids. So how do we do that? And so we looked in, we put our minds together on our data team, and we're like, okay, what if we offer the course? So students who do not hit benchmark, if you go to college, you would, and you do test optional, they give a placement test. If it's not test optional and you show that your SAT that you didn't hit benchmark, you're going to take this course. That's the foundational skills. And it's Introduction to College Writing and Reading. We decided, and with the help of families, that we would offer that class here next year. So now our seniors, these students who did not hit benchmark have the opportunity, and they want to go to college and they want to have those skills. Here's another opportunity for them to take the class and they get credit. And for some of these kids, it's the first time they'll have an opportunity to take a college level class. So we're really excited to offer that opportunity. And that came from the data. Here's another example, I'm going to go really quick. Another programming decision we made was we were looking when we were doing curriculum review in 2019 that we were all over the place with our vocabulary, to be frank, all over the place with our vocabulary instruction. And students were coming in larger and larger gaps. When students learn to read later, their vocabulary is delayed. So how are we going to address all these needs by the time? So we were looking into different programming and we piloted Membean. Membean is a personalized vocabulary program, came out the perfect time during the bad word C, COVID, because it could be done online and it was personalized. This is something that all of our students get from 9th through 12th grade. And now I'm proud to say that our vocabulary, which is measured on SAT as word in context, is one of our areas of strength. In comparison, the average is 10 out of 15 on SAT and the state average is 8. Yes. So we're continuing to see that. And also this data aligns with our STAR. You can see here. This is an example of a snapshot of, this is actually vocabulary standards for 10th grade. This is a spring class, 10th grade class. I'm not going to name the teacher who's standing behind me. This is her class. So, and this is a report, and I'm also sharing, I tied into the vocabulary. This is all of her students hitting all their on average, it looks like all her students. The average per class is hitting all their vocabulary standards. And teachers use reports like this to see how are their classes doing. Okay, I hear how the course is doing, but how are my kids doing? But that is one look. But we still care, just like with the SAT, how are my individual students doing? So here's that one class, and then she took one standard. We looked at, and this is zooming in. I took out all the students' names, but you can actually see how every single student is doing with the standards. Teachers use this information in data conversations. I meet with the English department 3 times a year. We go through every time they have do their data. Kate will explain the process a little bit. And we really hone in. How are my classes doing? How are my students doing? Who do I need to be concerned with? And this particular student is now in interventions. It said vocabulary, but when we peel back the layer, it wasn't necessarily vocabulary. Student is being interventions for decoding, for pronunciation of words. When students can't pronounce words over time and there's gaps in those areas, it leads to a lack of vocabulary and understanding. But for more about that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate. I'm going to show us how we dig into the data because it's a little more complicated.
So obviously, as a classroom teacher, I focus on individual students. And Kim and I sit down at the beginning of the year and we have this huge binder and we have a bunch of tabs open. And it's really hard to get a feel for what this meeting looks like. So we wanted to make a comparison to House. Please tell me you've all seen the TV show House. For those of you who haven't, he's this wacky doctor who gets all these complex cases. And he has this huge whiteboard and he throws up all this information. He even sends his team to like the people's houses and digs through their cabinets and looks in their closets to try to figure out what is wrong with this person. So that is what we do. We don't go into their homes.
Dead files.
Yeah, we go into dead files, we go into middle school data, we go into how they're doing in their classes so far, prior interventions that they've had. We look at every little bit piece of information. It's pretty intense. We dig. The screeners, like Kim said, are only thermometers, so it's what do you call it, the dipstick, to see just the red flags. Actually, sometimes those kids who aren't red flagging, we do in our data dives, we see that there are some gaps as well. So we can't just rely on that one screener because they may be in the green, but they actually have been using compensating skills to override that. So we do get, there's some of those that we dig out of that. Once we realize that there are some gaps there, then as the classroom teacher, I contact home. It's usually very well received. Please, whatever you need to do, please do for my child. Whatever, you know, I've noticed things in the past. I've always wondered. Please just help my child. And luckily, we have a wonderful intervention team. The kids are very willing to work with the team, very well received in that respect. And then we get to see the wonderful growth that happens. So Kim's gonna share with you the growth of when we start in that house whiteboard, and then we move on to giving them the interventions and then the wonderful outcomes of that.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you a quick overview. This year, we had 51 students receive English reading or writing interventions. And so we have 27 in math, and that's not because we don't have the needs in math, we had 2 interventionists for reading and we had 1 for math. 24/7 students met benchmark and exited, 9 students are at tier 3, 2 students moved to 504 plans, and 1 is tentative referral to PPP. If you notice, that could have been referrals. And sometimes we have referrals that go outside, they circumvent MTSS, and that's really, I think, parents panic. So I think, try to get the numbers, I think we had 5 this year and 4 did not qualify. And they got kicked back, like, so why don't you try this really great MTSS plan you have? It's like, so we just need to get that message out, but it is effective. For the math, we have 27 students received math intervention, 16 met benchmark and exited, 3 students are at tier 3. 6 students, so we needed another data point. We don't just exit students based on 1 data point. So we needed to wait. We have 6 that are on schedule. If they continue to hold those skills and don't lose them, they will be exiting. Just to note, of the 51 students, 11 just added in for English in May. So it's a revolving door. It's hard to do it year to year because we are constantly taking students in and out, giving interventions at the tier 1 level, which is the classroom level, during those data conversations. So by the time they're with us, and I feel like we're last week's high school, we're like last round. These are stubborn, so we have to, work really hard. It takes a little bit of time to move them a little bit. It's not 6 weeks, it's usually, a quarter to a semester, sometimes a year, but we do make the gains with students. Well, they make the gains, I should say. And Kate's gonna show, because you know what, numbers don't really say anything. You gotta hear from the kids, right? So, just gonna tell you about Ted and then.
So just one student entered my classroom in the fall of this past school year, and she entered with some anxiety and intentional, and she was super quiet. I just chalked it up to the anxiety. Very rarely participated, didn't really engage in the classroom conversation. When I met with Kim in our house meeting with the whiteboard, we looked at her STAR scores going back years and years, and she was always up and down, ranging from 7th percentile, then up to the 44th percentile, and back down to the 3rd percentile, just like ping pong ball, all over the place. And she was below grade level in reading, which is why she was appropriately placed in the B level class. And so during this house process of digging all the data, we noticed some spelling issues. And with those spelling issues, that sent her to the MTSS to be screened. She was put into MTSS interventions And she has now gone up from specific grade level to 2.5 years of growth. So in one school year, just through the intervention, she made 2.5 years worth of growth in one specific year. She got an A+ on her final exam. And she is no longer that quiet student who just sits there and doesn't participate. We actually had a Socratic seminar at the end of the year, and I was like, okay, you can't talk so much. Some other people an opportunity to talk. So she just did a completely 360.
And she now is moving into A level.
She's moving into A level. Yeah, so she's moving out of B level, so she's moving up and she's going into A level just by closing her gaps with Kim. So these interventions have not only closed the gaps, the academic gaps, they allowed that elevator that Kim has mentioned before to go up. Some kids have been sort of stuck at a specific floor, but like this one particular student, the elevator is now going up. And just evidence of these testimonies here from intervention, actually Kim's intervention students, it shows that not only going up academically, but also their confidence as well. And you know that cheesy saying like, well, we want you to reach for the stars. We want them to be as high as they can, so they feel that they can actually reach for those particular stars that they're striving for. Thank you.
So before we open up for questions, I just wanted, I know that the gratitude was shared from the team, but I'll just reiterate that a high quality assessment system and the stories that you heard tonight, they don't happen without the necessary roles and responsibilities in place to make these important decisions to support teachers and students. So, you know, our admin coaches, teachers, interventionists, paraeducators are key in analyzing data, developing the action steps and moving this work forward. So just a thank you to the board for supporting our staffing model and the work behind it.
Thanks, Annalise.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone. This is just so much information and I'm a data junkie. So I really like this and I probably have 1,000 questions or could dig in deep. And it also gave us insights into each of the schools that I think we've also been asking for because we were so busy with budget and COVID and other things like that, we kind of lost that way a little bit. And I think when we had the fifth grade come in a month ago or whatever it was, I think we all really enjoyed that. This is really getting us back into some of the, you know, what's really going on in the school. So I think this is really helpful.
And I would call tonight a teaser.
Yeah.
I mean, we tried to provide you with, you know, an overview and snapshots, but I would encourage the board to think about other information or data that you are looking for that you'd like for us to come back and dig a little bit deeper. You know, we do, as you have heard tonight, we look at a lot, you know, I think the house analogy is a great one. There's so much. It's hard to sometimes decide which is necessary and appropriate to help the board make decisions, but you know, I know we're going to move into a goal workshop after this, so there may be additional data points that you're interested in looking for, and we can always come back or dig deeper in certain areas. You know?
No, and thank you. I'm just trying to assess and get everybody's thoughts. So in terms of time, it's 7:35. We saw the little bit left of our meeting, and then we want to do our goals workshop. So I want to be, do we want to spend a few minutes now, maybe like 10 minutes of question? I could take an hour of questions. I really could. I really could, honestly. At each of the levels, I have questions. So one option, you know, do we want to bring each level back individually? To bring elementary back and we can spend some time. I mean, we'll go through our goal session, but really spend a little more time and we can ask some questions and dig in and understand that level, then middle school and then high school, you know, at future meetings. Or how I'd be interested in how you want to do it.
Because I think this is a lot of information in essentially a short amount of time.
And I think that, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but this is fantastic data, the weaving of the stories and showing us kind of a path and the process. But I think we need time to process, and again, I'll just speak for me. I need some time to process and digest a lot of this. I did have one general question, but I'll let others kind of comment on how to approach this.
Comment on approach or questions for that?
Well, I did want to comment on an approach
Okay,
too.
good.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I agree. First of all, thank you. This
Yeah.
is incredible, really great. But in terms of all of these questions, I want to let them keep doing what they're doing. Can we funnel some of this through Annalise and get our questions answered that way without stealing all of their time to keep coming back here and giving, I keep doing what you're doing. And that's just, I mean, I like the idea of, doing this, and I appreciate you taking the time to do it, but I also know that tomorrow's the first day of summer and you're here giving a presentation to us, and
Appreciate you recognizing that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think one of us, not me, came from a beach house, from a vacation home. And so that speaks to the dedication of the group in the room who wants to share the story with the board so that you know the work behind the numbers.
So would you, Annalise, Jeff, or team want to come up with, how should we approach? We could do a workshop, we can do, in one second, I could have a workshop, we could just have a small workshop, we don't need, and we don't need an answer now, but I mean, that's something.
I think you have time to process the information that we've provided. I'm sure you're wondering about other pieces too along the way, and then we can identify spaces to workshop further around. I think we would want to focus on data that's going to help drive some of the goal work that you're doing or help measure. We talked about, we'll be talking a little bit about outcomes tonight. So, we can tie all of that in so that's connected to the focus of the board.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think workshopping it or, I know some of the issues we've had in the past is when I present just to AAA, there's a portion of the board that misses out. And I think we came to consensus that the full board really wants to hear some of this information. So
Absolutely, or AAA hears it twice because we do it at AAA and then we do it again here. So either way, yeah, so I think this is the right way to do it.
Eric?
How to lay that out.
Eric?
Hold on, Kate, then Candace, then Jamie, then Elisa.
So thank you again. I concur with what's been said already, but I hear vocabulary across the theme and I'm wondering, and I also heard spelling errors and then encoding errors. So I'm wondering about phonological awareness and phonemic analysis and that whole piece. And there's been some big New York Times articles written about it.
Yeah.
And Lucy Calkins McCormick, I know, has been kind of under siege for her approach to literacy and intervention. And I know we see nodding heads over here. So you know what I'm saying. So, but I, as a speech pathologist, I know how important the phonemic awareness piece is, and that goes across. So I'm wondering how we can ramp that up and having more of that and more vitality, I guess, with our instruction and having more universal vocabulary being shared so that we know what we should be knowing, and the parents and all the community can be supporting that as much as possible across all domains so that it is generalized and mastered for all purposes, for reading, writing, and everything.
we completely agree. And we could report out on some of the things we're doing, but we can also talk about how, what are some areas in which you want us to continue to focus on? Okay, yeah.
Good foundation.
Candace?
Oh, yes, thank you. So hopefully everyone can hear me. I am profusely sorry that I had to get up and scoot out, but I have been on the meeting. So I did catch the presentation from the high school. I have so much to say on it, and I do have some questions, but most importantly, I want to touch on a few things. Number one, Annalise, the presentation was absolutely fantastic, and it was not just data, data. You made it real by bringing in your team and of course, extraordinary people that we have. And thank you for coming in to do that, to personalize it and really give a different picture, the real picture. Secondly, I also want to thank Annalise for calling it what it is, a problem, and that it is notable and that we're making such great strides to not just fix it, but to create progress, which has already been done, and I think will continue to do so. Our interventionists are the glue, starting at elementary, middle school, high school, and I'm going to speak to that clearly with a parent hat. I can speak to it from going through it with both of my children, and the extraordinary feats that our interventionists do. So the presentation was absolutely fantastic, noting that this is an issue and it completely attacking it, and that's kind of how I feel our team is going with the approach. But just wonderful. As far as the data, I think that it is a lot, and to come back to kind of go through each level, elementary school, middle school, and high school would be beneficial. So thank you very much, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Candace,
Candace.
appreciate it.
Amy?
So, one, I'm gonna say thank you. I've sat in a lot of these assessment presentations, and this is hands down the best one I've ever been a part of or witnessed.
I attribute
And my
that to the
tenure.
team who was here.
This team is awesome.
Yep.
But in that same vein, I don't think it's fair to all the hard work that they've done and all for us to rush it. With the discussion that we have times for tonight. So they did amazing, and I think it's not fair to them for us to say, you've got 10 minutes to answer like 500 questions from us. And it's not fair for us to have to like shoot out 100 questions in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that we should postpone it for another night.
Yeah.
But again, this was the best one of these I've been a part of the year. So thank you to all of you for this. This was awesome.
Thank you, Vicky.
Lisa?
Thanks. I concur with what my fellow board members have said, and thank you. And I think it really helped drive the meaning and the importance that, you know, that is tied to the data. My question is I don't have it completely worked out of my brain, but I'm thinking about the varied comfort level that people have with working with data. And, you know, you are looking at determining root cause and implementation strategies, which student cohorts to target, which individual students, which data you're bringing in to triangulate. And if you could just kind of speak to the kind of bridging of the different comfort levels that, you know, staff and students and teachers have with, and you know, I know that you're working with the coaches and interventionists, but kind of bring, you know, kind of making that connection to working with all of this data.
So if I can pare back the question, what is maybe the professional learning, what does the professional learning look like in response to accessing data, utilizing data to drive, like, what is the support, or is it just level of comfort at this point?
I think just level of comfort, right? So it's, I mean, I think we're finding additional ways to look at data and, you know, it's something to kind of, you know, if you're not working with it all the time, right? Sort of process and understand it. And, you know, one question maybe it's sort of related is to the example of the spelling, the last example that we heard about from the student. And like, how did that then trigger the implementation strategy behind, you know, so you looked at spelling and you found a root cause and.
Gotcha. So I'll liken it to level of expertise around data and practices associated with the problems that we find. So you heard from experts in the area of math and literacy tonight.
And so they are the ones who are the drivers, the initial drivers in looking at data. Those experts then, just as you had heard in terms of the partnership with Kim and Kate, help to look at data, analyze the data. What does it mean for a classroom teacher that then translates into classroom practices, but might also be found in some work around that tiered intervention we talked about. So I think it's varied levels of expertise and different varied levels of comfortability. To put like a number on it would be hard for me right now. And I think honestly, post-COVID, we're just sort of getting back into our data game. If I'm being completely honest, and I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but you know, I feel like this year, this is my second year here. I feel like finally I have a handle on our assessment and what it's measuring and how we're using it to drive instruction. I would have never been able to bring this presentation to you a year ago. Just because it takes time to get a handle on it from a supervisory perspective. So I guess I would say we have experts in the work to help support the decision making, but we definitely have additional learning to do. And one of the focus areas that we're going to be utilizing, we align this work to our instructional focus area, which is explicit instruction. And so this year, we're really going to be looking at planning for explicit instruction and using the data, helping classroom teachers to use data to make decisions, day-to-day instructional decisions in the classroom, vocabulary, for example, right? Like those down to that granular level, and what does the assessment provide for us for information that we can use? But it's an ongoing learning process, and I think there's varied levels of expertise around it.
And I mean, I think, thank you so much for that response, and I think I was kind of just looking to get that flavor, right, to given the context behind it and understand kind of that partnership, right?
Yeah.
So that's more along the lines.
And there are opportunities added in throughout the course of the school day that you heard. We use PLC. I think maybe you heard teaching and learning meetings. So there's time carved out throughout the course of the school day. At different times throughout the, maybe not every day, but teaching and learning every other week, where the teams of teachers dive into the data with the expert to look at it, analyze it, make some sense of it, and talk about what might be the classroom practices associated with. We're always looking to build and lift capacity around that work. We can't just rely on experts to tell us what to do. It's sort of an ongoing learning curve. So I don't know if anyone from the team wants to speak more.
I could add on, as you said, like post-pandemic, between staff turnover and just, changes in students and staff, we felt the need to recalibrate, at the elementary level. So we did meet with all three schools, our school improvement teams, and that's when we did CIRC to go through data analysis protocols to, see if what we were doing was on track with what we should be doing, and if they had a more effective or efficient way of looking at data. And then we piloted at Flanders and did like a gradual release. So they met with us the first time and led it. And then in the middle of the year, we did it in tandem, and then the end of the year, we did it fire. Building the pattern and that feel comfortable. And it just I think we've always been very good at having data. I think in reflecting, we've become exceptional at being able to house data in one place, and have really worked hard with supporting and training our staff with knowing where to look, knowing where it's housed, how to find it, and what it means. And that's also done through not only the PLCs, but department meetings, grade level meetings. I think that our coaches and interventionists have been a huge instrumental piece of being able to help our staff to gain a level of comfortability to ask the questions and be able to share and have candid conversations. And I think, especially in the area of math, Kristen's been huge. She was a classroom teacher. There's a huge level of trust. And I think that has been another instrumental piece as well, with helping us to be able to move and make progress. And to be a big support for our staff. So, having our data housed in a spreadsheet and spending the time for departments and grade level has been a huge piece.
Did someone else have a question?
No, you're up.
Okay, this is amazing to me. Being a retired teacher, how things have changed so much over the years. Yeah, some people's over there. How do you use all of this
inform your professional development then going forward?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think let's take math, fifth grade math for an example, right? So Kristen and I just met at the end of the school year, talking about moving to that, identifying core issues associated with that drop in the math score. And what do the fifth grade math teachers need to help support that work moving forward? And so we have, we're moving to a primary resource, illustrative math, as a curriculum resource, but you can't just move to a curriculum resource without supporting teachers in its implementation. And so I don't know, Kristen, if you want to talk further about that, but part of the plan for that fifth grade team and the middle school team is to support them through professional learning modules as they roll out the new curriculum. So, you know, if we're making decisions associated with the data that we're seeing, you know, we have to follow up with support for teachers. We do that through professional learning, like I just shared, but we also do that. That is our coaching model. Our coaching model is actually called student-centered coaching, where the first thing a coach and a teacher does is look at the data. What is the data telling us? How does that drive the decision-making instructionally in the classroom to move the students forward and close the gaps? So Sue talked about doing that with a team of teachers, and specifically around a geometry unit, focusing on geometry vocabulary. So that is how we use the data to support teachers in the work. And then, you know, moving forward, teachers should be able, you know, the hope is that we can pull back that support, and having teachers been through that coaching cycle, they're more comfortable to take that on themselves now. And might not necessarily need super coaching cycle around that. They might pick a different area. You know, I think I got the geometry thing down, but like, let's really look at fractions, you know, something like that. So I think it's ongoing and it's embedded in the work that we do.
And I can just add the coaching cycles as we work, as the coaches, as we work in different cycles, we start to see trends that are manifesting. Like, okay, this is a trend, not just with, I can say, I see this in the science department, I'm seeing this in social studies department, I'm seeing, and then that we bring that back as some of the PDs that we run. So if it's something more widespread, it becomes more of a universal PD. It's kind of like our students or tiers, right? What do everyone need? And then our coaching cycles become more of like that tier 2 for teachers. And then we have consulting. So consulting is even one-on-one, just coming in, I have a problem of practice, I have this particular student, this case, that's the house type of thing. I've done these things, it's not working, what do we do? And then we have diagnostic testing that we do as the coach, as a consultant or interventionist, and that gives them that information. So it's peeling back. So you said that thing about the phonemic awareness, that student who flagged for spelling, intervention with phonemic awareness and unsaid syllable types. So it was, that was the missing, that was the glue that was missing for her. She had gone through spelling, so she'd memorized how to spell certain words, and she had moved beyond that, but that was, you hit a nail on the head right there.
I knew that,
Yeah, but that's where it comes from.
We had to just really put the foundational literacy, that's something, you know, that came up, and so we did lots of P with the science of reading. So, you know, that was another driver.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Glad to hear that. Good. Thank you,
Well,
guys.
Yeah,
Beautiful
thank you
job.
so much. Yeah. Thank you. That really great. And you can see everybody up here is highly engaged and really appreciated. So maybe Annalise, Jeff, we just kind of figure out that what's the best way to come back, because there's definitely interest, definitely want these, this is what we want on our agendas. So, and have discussion.
Happy
So,
to
yes.
respond in any way the board sees fit.
excellent. Well, thank you so much. Want to
Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Send them all.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Go recharge.
That goes to the administrators too.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the summer.
Yes.
Just shows we definitely for those conversations.
Yeah.
And we've got to get back to having more of those.
Thank you, Annalise. I know you work hard.
You're most welcome. I'm so sorry about how long it
This was good quality time. No, this was great.
Well, there's never enough time.
No,
It's probably us throwing. Asking.
it could have been its own meeting.
Too.
We could have spent on each
Yeah, and truly, I'm open to feedback too. If there are pieces you felt like wasn't necessary, to help streamline, please shoot me an email. I
No.
suggestions, I'm completely open.
I think-
want to provide you with the information that's necessary. to
I think
make
the
informed
bigger is
decisions around the
getting
table.
it from an agenda planning perspective to make sure that we have the appropriate
it just
time.
gets into-
That's,
I think it
yeah,
gets
that's, it needs enough time.
Yeah.
Hearing from those different levels.
Yeah, yeah.
More
So I like the anecdotal part of it, makes
Yeah.
it
Comes to life.
more come
Yeah.
to life.
Yeah.
It's not just the data being
Yeah.
thrown at you, it's this is how we're using
Yeah.
the data.
And I liked hearing the trajectory of starting with elementary, middle and high, and so maybe next year it's its own meeting, and then every month there's a follow-up for elementary, middle, and then high.
To go
get
back
more
to the
granular.
calendar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go back to
Yeah.
the calendar, but if we can map that out kind of at the start of the year, so we know that we have that time and it's reserved, I think that would be great. 'Cause This was
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Yeah, so we have we're starting
No,
to,
I'm saying-
yes, we started doing that, so we
Because
should,
it's all-
yeah, we should put that on our calendar of
Yeah.
things that is locked in. Like if we say goals workshop is on, the first meeting after graduation is our first. This is, at some point, we have really a set time that we
Yeah.
just lock it in.
Sounds good. And can we also include all the academic areas tonight?
Yes.
But I know the electives support a lot of that. and I'm curious in what ways they do that.
Absolutely.
That was one of the questions
Yeah.
that I was gonna ask is how, I noticed that Shane mentioned that they have the
TikTok.
kid talk. And does that include specials? And in certain specials, like at the elementary level, it's much different, there's a single teacher, right? They're not moving around, so that's kind of fallen on. But you've got, I'm looking at my area and I'm thinking about geometry and there's no reason, or even art, you could maybe, depending on what the
Absolutely.
terms are, maybe there's some way to support some of that, share that load a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on, discussion action items policy, and we'll go to Elisa
Oh, great.
to drive. We have 3 second reviews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Change the screen. Okay, so we have a proposed second review for two policies in the 1000 series, policy 1325, advertising and promotion of commercial activities, and policy 1330, community use of school facilities. No comments or suggestions have been received or submitted to Chad. I don't think there's no motion or anything, right? We're just
I would like to make a motion to approve the suggested revision of policies 1325 and 1330.
Thank you.
One second. All those in favor, any further discussion, sorry. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained. Oh, and yep.
All right, moving on to the 6000 series, we have a suggested revision for 6172.3, the equivalent education and the parental direction policy, and no comments or suggestions have been submitted on this line.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the suggested revision of policy 6172.3.
Further comment, discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
And.
Opposed?
Sorry.
Sorry, abstain.
I'm not trying to move the meeting on.
No, please.
Policy 9325, proposed for a second. Had a second review, suggested, revision, and again, no comments or suggestions for submitted on this.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the suggested revision of policy 9325.
Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Uh,
Opposed, abstain. Passes, so those 3 have all been approved. Okay, that closes, thank you, Elisa. That closes discussion action items for tonight. And we move on to committee reports, and I don't think there were any from the last meeting. So we'll move on to administration reports.
Yeah, just in the essence of time, there's nothing major. Eric and I were talking today about the July meeting, but I think it'll kind of come up in our goal.
Okay.
Discussion, so.
Annalise, you covered, you did enough. Thank you. Mariana's is not here. That closes administration reports, board comments, future agenda items.
In the essence of time, I'm passing.
My one, graduations were great. They really were great. So, that was nice to see.
I think it's the best part about being on the board of ed, is to go to the graduation. It really
Yeah.
is nice.
It is nice culmination
It's
of
just
the year.
really exciting to hear the speeches and see the joy, and it's just very special. The attendance was phenomenal at the high school graduation.
Yeah,
The perfect night. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the weather was phenomenal.
okay. So we will,
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstain. And we will adjourn this meeting, and then we will start up the committee of the whole meeting next. Everybody wants to take a minute or two. And then, yeah. So what's it? We'll take a 2-minute break, be back in 5. But,
I'm stepping over.